All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this panel discussion. I'm Aaron Symes, CEO and founder of WebRTC Ventures. We're proud to sponsor the WebRTC track this year at the IIT-RTC. We've been looking forward to this discussion on how has the pandemic changed WebRTC. I'm already triggered by the graphic that Chad has there from the Black Plague on the screen. So this is going to be a really good discussion, I'm sure. Our moderator is Chad Wallace Hart, from CWH Consulting, and also the founder of WebRTC Hacks. And Chad, I'll leave it to you to introduce the rest of your panelists in just a moment. For those watching, whenever someone is sharing their screen, just double click on the screen share in order to maximize that. And if you have any questions throughout the session, please type those in the session text chat. All right, so thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Chad and panelists, for being here.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Since you gave me an intro, I will skip the boring part about talking about myself. You can see the links and the things there. I think a lot of people in the audience probably recognize me from past IIT RTC events. I'm sorry we can't see each other in person. I'm also joined with several panelists here. I'll give a real brief intro and ask them actually to introduce themselves in a moment. But first, I just wanted to, I guess, set some context for the discussion. So certainly, you know, as you've seen, if you've been watching some of the other sessions here, I mean, there's been a lot of things that have changed because of the pandemic and obviously what we're doing now. You know, one of the first notables, like remote work, right? Instead of in conferences, social here. So we're going to touch on a lot of these topics. So, you know, Tsahi from TestRTC has customers, I think, in all these segments. We'll go through here. We in the customer service category, we have Fernando from TalkDesk. We'll talk about how how things in contact centers and customer service have changed. We have Ali from Teladoc, which will talk about telehealth. You know, obviously that's been a very huge emerging industry. There's certainly a lot of other topics we can go through. I did also want to talk a little bit about something that undercuts all of the segments, and that's developers, right? And this is IIT. I think a lot of people out there are developers, are involved with building products, bringing products to market. So the developers area has always been real interest to me. And I guess I said before, one of the great things. Well, I say it's not, the pandemic's not great, but it actually has been pretty good for the real-time communications industry, just because it's really helped to bring and make RTC a lot more prominent, a lot more important, and give it a lot more focus than it has in the past. And you can see this is just a recent survey that was conducted by Trust Radius here, where you can see in near-term plans there's a lot of focus on how to get employees to move to remote working, right? And that involves video communications, and video communications leads to WebRTC and real-time communications. And then remote learning, you can see these as two main topics. I also periodically run some stats on GitHub here, and you can check out some of the methodology of how I do this on WebRTC Hacks. But I essentially go and look and tag various different repos and users on GitHub and mark them as WebRTC users based on keywords in there. And I track that over time. And here's the view for 2020. You can see here, and you can see that, no surprise, I mean, there was a very big peak, spike in April, and both in terms of number of repos and users. And I'll talk about the difference there in a moment. But you can see here another big thing I look at, in addition to just number of people looking or reading or viewing code, forking repositories, making it that sort of thing. I also look for active pushes and commits. So if it's a little bit different if someone's actually writing code that has some term or terminology for WebRTC in it versus those that are just viewing or consuming it. And you can see here, there also was a spike of WebRTC, what I'm calling here contributors, right? People actually writing and contributing code. In this case, contributing code or writing issues or handling pull requests, right? And The spike there actually is a lot less than it was in April. I mean, there's still quite a spike, but it's kind of a little more of a gradual decline. And if you kind of compare this to the year-over-year view, you can see actually there was a quite a peak in number of users. This is overall active users in April. But it's kind of curious, the actual peak in terms of number of repos actually didn't happen until July. And due to historical patterns, it is typically, the summer tends to be less. People take vacation, you see less code. But I'd say this is, being actually, very encouraging. Of course, there was a spike and people needed real-time communications a lot more. But there's a lot of indicators to say that this is not just a one-time thing. There's, looks like there's some sustained activity here. People got introduced to WebRTC in April, earlier in the year, but it looks like they're continuing to work on projects and still be very involved. And unsurprisingly, we're up quite a bit compared to last year. So with that quick intro, actually, we're gonna walk through a few different topics today. I want to talk briefly around customers, how needs and traffic patterns have changed. We'll spend a lot of time talking about technology and how the various vendors here have gone about implementing their networks and how those have changed. We'll talk a little bit about staff and development and how they're supporting growth and change in traffic here, and we'll wrap up with the future. I guess what we see next. For those out in the audience, I hope people can type in their questions. I'll read them off throughout, so please don't hold your questions. We have some time to discuss. Feel free to go and put them in, and I'll add those questions into the discussions. I'll read them off for you. So with that, I'll do a very brief for our panelists. I'm actually going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their companies and their networks, just to set some context before our discussion. So to start, actually, I'd like maybe Fernando, you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and about TalkDesk.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chad. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Fernando Lapa. I'm the network engineering manager here at TalkDesk. And basically, I deal with call quality and, WebRTC challenges that we've been having on the implementation with the customer, okay? So this is a brief overview. I'll just have 2 slides here about what TalkDesk does and what I can disclose what TalkDesk does. So we have an application that communicates via API with our global media servers network to deliver call control to the rest of our services, right? Which we have in terms of CTI, recordings, integrations, and so on. We can see here in terms of our current global media server network that we use a system called GLL, which basically lets us connect to the nearest media server around the world. So not something groundbreaking, but this is how we do our voice delivery. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Fernando. I'm going to have a lot of questions for you, so we'll go into a little more detail on that. But maybe before we do that, Ali, can you do your intro, please?
Absolutely, delighted. I'm Ali Eichorn. I'm the CTO of Teladoc, and we're a company that's been in business for about 20 years, making it possible for physicians and patients remote. And as you mentioned, the pandemic has. So slides here. First, an introduction to Teladoc. Importantly, Teladoc acquired Touch Health, which is how I came to Teladoc. I was with InTouch previously. Teladoc is really focused on selling systems to insurance companies. InTouch Health is selling a lot of the same kind of services systems. We're together now. Took place in the middle of on business. We're now doing about 10 million telehealth consults a year. And, I think of interest to this group, we've had a SIP-based network running since 2005 for high telehealth, turn servers, Media5H.X is inside of hospital systems. So on the right, see, we place in emergency rooms, in ICUs, surgery suites, and things like this, and then we make it possible for physicians, and that's usually on an emergent basis. This is really high acuity applications where the system has to work. So there's a ton of redundancy and a real focus on monitoring and managing our network. In 2017, we actually began an implementation of a WebRTC-based network in parallel for low acuity telehealth, and we've been using TalkBox as our service provider. And the goal is to implement a solution for patients, and increasingly people wanted to be able to use standard desktop browsers without having to install an app. What happened during the to us? This is I won't delve into, but the two lines that I went into where you see there was this huge peak. Then through the summer there was kind of a decline as hospital health systems slowly started all of in the beginning, and then they kind of went back to business. It's been a tapering off, and it's actually, but I think the way we look at this is more like the green lines, that we had a steady growth in our business that was taking place, and then there was an option of telehealth. And honestly, even when the pandemic is a distant memory, there will be incredible adoption. Patients recognize that this type. Here's a very diagram of our application. I think that the thing I wanted to really highlight here is that we have a network of 11 data centers worldwide, kind of lower center part of this diagram, and all of our traffic runs data where we have our servers, all traffic. If the WebRTC session can be, which then we just run through our nodes, or even directly peer-to-peer between the two participants through a media relay, and we use TalkBox, as I mentioned, to the media relay as route centers. And we do this for security purposes. System customers lock down networks and insist that all traffic goes in or out of their networks very tightly. And so you can imagine that by having this network facilitate, but it also has some constraints. So that's just a brief intro to what we do, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Ali. We'll certainly spend some more time on that. Tsahi, you want to talk through TestRTC a little bit?
Sure. So I'm Tsahi Levent-Levi, blog like me, but also CEO and co-founder of a company called TestRTC. What we do is offer a solution for the life cycle of developers in WebRTC that do testing, monitoring, and support. When I came to sit down and look at the architecture, this is about what we are running in our data centers in the cloud. So we've got the main data centers that runs everything on Node. And then we've got Redis and cloud storage and databases with MongoDB. And the backend is a bunch of probes. Everything is Dockerized, running in different data centers and locations and regions across the globe. I'm not sure how many regions we're on. I think around 10, whatever is available from Google and our customers want. What happened in the last year is that the growth that we've seen and the demand made us make a lot of changes, where most of them, besides removing bottlenecks, were to move from open source platforms to managed ones. So, for example, instead of using Redis, we're now using Memory Store on the Google Cloud. We're moving from simply using Docker machines to Kubernetes. And we're going to use Google Functions for some of the orchestration work that we have instead of using Node.js servers. We're replacing Kong with Google Endpoints and MongoDB with Atlas. The whole intent and idea here is to reduce the need for us to think about scaling, where this doesn't relate to the core problem that we have, which is scaling testing for WebRTC customers. This is done in this part that is not going to see a lot of change. And where we see a lot of ops work that we have. Whenever we have DevOps work, we're trying to see how we can reduce that.
Thanks, Tsahi. So maybe before we talk through some of the technology choices and dig into that a little more detail, I would like to, I guess, first talk about customers and how things are changing. So I guess maybe Fernando, you could start. What type of, certainly I guess you've seen growth, right? What does that look like? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, it looks like the best second. Yeah. It looks like the best second quarter ever, Chad. That's what it looks like. No, but in terms of customers, obviously, we've seen a lot of growth. In terms of supporting those customers, I think I can speak of that right now, right? Supporting those customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, well, I don't know. I suppose there are some public statements on, like, just to give an idea. I mean, do you have a stat on overall traffic growth? Roughly that you've had to deal with, and I guess yeah.
We don't have a percentage
Okay.
that I can say, but I can tell you that our accounts now are more 10,000, 20,000 agents versus probably 500 or 1,000 before the pandemic.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can tell you, in terms of supporting those customers or type of customers, it changed dramatically, at least for me and my team, because we used to face one external IP, 100 people inside of an office, right? And now it kind of changes the other way around, right? I have 100 people and 100 different IPs. So in terms of what we do, which is helping the customer getting set up with our service, the pandemic changed everything. Okay. So like it was shown on a previous presentation, yes, we've seen a lot of jitter and latency go up, and of course packet loss, because it comes with the territory when you move from home, right? So we had to take some actions around that.
Yeah, and Ali, you actually showed a good chart showing your traffic growth and kind of the peak and sustained growth you have. Maybe you can you add a little bit color to that? Have the feature needs changed, I guess, of what you're offering or what customers are using in your products, in addition to just using it more?
And we realize this a lot. To the pandemic, a great deal of was unplanned and ad hoc. So stroke or a heart attack, and that happen when they happen, and then you have to be able to react to them. A lot of patients would come in through our hospital system. You visit Mayo Clinic and it says "See a doctor." You click the button and then you go in and you get placed in queue, and you. Though a whole bunch of scheduled care shifted away because doctors want to see each other face to face. So all up that kind of activity, and all chronic patients, if you had cancer or you're diabetic or something like that, ongoing treatment regime, your team, and then entirely. So within that peak, what there really was a tremendous new scheduled care, urgent care, and that's one of the things that we've seen has a lot of those sessions are virtually. It's still a safety consideration, convenience consideration. Physicians that if you had asked them in February, oh no, patients virtually, I need the only way I can provide good Now that they've been forced to see, realize, wow, this technology is great. It's very my patients as well. It even takes less time. Advantages, like I can get real-time transcript. They did their patterns, track to the pandemic now, and it's by no means over, by the way. If we track the pandemic, we'd still see a tremendous to care.
Maybe before we talk about TestRTC, Fernando, can you follow up a little bit on? Are you seeing any differences in how customers are using your platform?
For sure.
I guess I guess for you, maybe calls are getting longer or different, or
Also, yes. Calls are so we have more minutes in terms of utilization for sure. And I forgot about saying something that's very important. It was on early access and we put it at general access really quick, which is our mobile app, right? So it was really important for us to get on that place. We have it now for Android and iOS, and things just got escalated really quick with the need for current customers, not only new customers, but current customers, to move into those technologies.
Okay,
and I mean
so,
account for 1,000, 2,000 agents. So, okay, I'm talking about.
Yeah, so the mobile side of things, the mobile app side of the thing was new, I guess, and then
it was.
There must have been a lot of pressure on that all of a sudden, right?
It was because all of the sudden now there's no offices and people say that their computer does not support our system, which is not much, but many of them have Windows 7 and are in certain countries like India and etc. And so they all have Android, right? Or they all have iOS, right? So that kind of shifted that way, and we are receiving a lot of calls using the mobile app.
Okay. Do you see a preference for the mobile over desktop, or any thoughts?
Well, on those situations, like I said, on those situations when we have field agents, for sure. Why? Because a lot of our customers, I don't know if I say, work closely with Salesforce, right? So they are sales reps, or they support Service Cloud. So they need to have both on, right? Now you have also a mobile app for Salesforce. So one thing kind of marries the other, and anyone with a portable device, which is cheaper on certain countries, can access that. So when the computer doesn't go at least to Windows 10, which seems like little, but sometimes it does not. In some countries, you would I have seen some situations you would be surprised. They go to the mobile. So only on those countries I would see more application of mobile during this pandemic.
Okay. And yeah, Tsahi, I'm curious. Well, I mean, you help companies like TalkDesk.
He does. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess you help a lot of these guys. Like, how have you seen? I guess, well, maybe start with how have your services changed, right? You offer monitoring and testing and support things. Like, I'm guessing there's been a lot less time for some versus the others, but maybe talk about that.
So yes, it seems that in testing, our customers now are the new customers are a lot more interested in doing stress testing right now, not tomorrow, not next week, now. So you can get a new customer that goes into the website signups on Saturday, and on Sunday he would pay, and they immediately would say, well, when can I use it? So we've seen a lot of these examples of customers, whereas before it was like, we want to test it, we want to try it out, let's evaluate, and it took a month or two until someone onboarded. This time it's companies that we don't know about, just come in, put a credit card and start using it for testing. Monitoring stayed the same. So roughly we don't see any changes there. These are the more long-term things that people are doing. So we might see growth, let's say, in half a year from now, when people understand that their systems are also, stabilizing and understand where things are headed. What we've seen is a huge growth in the support tool that we've had. Last year, just a year ago in November, we had only one customer, and that was TalkDesk. We started with them. Today, the revenue that we get from the support tools that we have versus the testing tools are almost the same. Because we have more people that are coming and saying, well, we've got the tools, they're running. We don't care if they run well or not because they are running and people are using them, so we don't want to test. What we care about is the fact that now people are complaining because they're actually using the product. And these are not the early adopters. This is everyone. So they don't even know how to use the system. They are complaining, but they're using Wi-Fi and bad networks, and they're in all of these different places. And we need to understand to be able to help them out to solve their problem, not our problems. Because if they can't connect, then they feel that our service is not good. So we started seeing a lot of people just adopting the support tools that we have, instead of looking at the developer tools for testing and monitoring and checking that the service is good.
Maybe while we have you, Tsahi, too, I do want to spend some time on the technology domain. Can you tell us a little more? I mean, you talked about how you're moving towards using more services, from the big cloud providers, as opposed to kind of doing your own DevOps and your own infrastructure. But can you walk us through kind of how things have changed, like through the pandemic for you, and how you've dealt with some of that growth? I mean, and those sound like conclusions you've made of where you're going, but maybe talk a little bit about what you've had to do in the meantime.
Yeah, so we're in transition in this place. So, for example, MongoDB switched to Atlas. The good thing is that we started that just when the pandemic hit, so we were already there. So we didn't need to care about the database, the new storage, whatever, backups. Now we're moving the rest. What we've seen immediately is that our support tool got hammered. Instead of having the traffic that it had before, like, a few hundreds of tests a day, it got thousands of tests a day. And then we had the company in here complaining that the speed tests are not good enough because they don't give accurate results. We went on and then we checked and we found two things. First of all, people are using our demo or abusing our demo. So 80% of our traffic came from the demo and not from paying customers. So we clamped down and just closed the demo altogether. So the demo is now something that if you want, we will give you access to it. And the second thing that happened is that we took out the machines that we had for speed testing and simply beefed them up. So today they're a lot bigger than they used to. We've had to change the way we run these machines, the way we monitor them. We're now offering on-premise machines as well for those that are moving. What we've seen, another interesting story is a lot of on-prem contact centers got screwed up in a way. Okay, you've built the PBX, it's inside your office. All of the calls are in the office, originating from the office. You've got hundreds of people sitting next to the PBX. Now all of these people are at home, and they're expected to connect directly into the office in order to connect to the PBX through a VPN. The VPN can't hold that load at all. And the first thing they need to do is, well, can it hold the load? Okay? And how do they test that? And how do they test people at home that connect to a PBX that is on-premise and from there connects to the cloud to actually do the calls? So you have these weird types of networks that are being configured today just to have people being able to work from home. And we've been in some of these deals and we've gone into them with Quality RTC, the product we have for support tools. And then we started installing on-premise machines in order to do these kinds of things. So we had the deployment in the cloud, and now part of our cloud goes on-premise where it needs to be for these types of customers.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, maybe we'll transition to Fernando. Hopefully you can comment on some of the same topics. I think for you, I mean, your situation is probably a little different. I know, I don't know if it's still the case, but historically you guys used, like Twilio and others for some of your infrastructure. So, maybe some of those concerns wouldn't be an issue if you're just relying on or as much of an issue if you have other partners or other people helping provide that. But I believe you are transitioning a lot of your own infrastructure. Maybe you can tell us about that and kind of how you've dealt with some of the growth, you guys dealing with the growth in your RTC infrastructure.
Well, I cannot disclose too much, and I will not confirm that we use that provider because contractually I cannot. I'm sorry, I cannot go that way. I would love to speak about that.
I'm sorry for trying, but
no. But in terms of growth, yes, we work with a partner. I'm not saying that's that one, so we don't have to worry too much about that in terms of having our own infrastructure in terms of media servers. Yes, something is coming in 2021, which is not yet in production, so it was not utilized during the pandemic.
Okay.
In terms of, I just want to point out two great features that we did in our product different because of the pandemic. One of them we call this the Guardian, which is an IP type access, where basically you send your, we're talking about technology now, but you send your agents home and you can see which IPs they are using. You can block some of them, which kind of makes sense on a contact center, and goes a little bit against what I was describing, getting VPN to connect to PBX. Well, I can still control it from home, so let's not do that. And in terms of connection type monitoring, we haven't developed our product yet before this to actually know if the person is using Wi-Fi or Ethernet. That was very important to us. As you understand, if someone complains about call quality, you can send them the insights of that call, showing, hey, you had jitter, you had packet lost, and that's why your call wasn't as you would expect it, and it's on your side, not on the carrier side. We can see that. But the final question is, why do I have jitter now and I didn't have before, right? So now we have the ability to show to that customer or that agent that they were using Wi-Fi. Okay, so that kind of helps, because if you're working from home as well, you're controlling your people. They say they are connecting by Ethernet, but they are not, right? So now you can actually see.
Yeah, I'm curious, and maybe Tsahi can comment on this too. I guess like when there's issues, I guess a lot of these agents are at home and maybe they don't have they're sharing bandwidth with their kids who are doing online school. Is there anything they can do about it, right? Other than saying, "Oh, your bandwidth's bad." Like, I guess is there a remedy, or are people just looking for this data for peace of mind, but then it's not necessarily actionable, or do you see them actually taking action on it?
From my side, I don't deal with the end customer.
It's more from my side.
Yeah.
So what I can tell you now in these cases, of course, I show them, I put a mirror to their faces, basically, right? I showed them the proof that it's not the server serves everyone. And if you have problems, then you need to check it internally, obviously, right? But then we have articles to help the customers actually move from Wi-Fi or use a PLC if they don't want to glue an Ethernet cable on their homes, go PLC, or at least use 5 gigahertz, right, to stay away from the 2.4 bandwidth range. But at the end of the day, I mean, I cannot do QoS chat on someone's home like I would do on their office, right? I cannot do that. I do that with customers when you are on the office on the enterprise level, and we actually put the media ranges so we can have some prioritization. I configure the SCPs, but I cannot do those on the house. So we're really limited there.
You have increased need to just say, you know what, it actually is not TalkDesk's fault. It's like it's your local environment.
And we have we have an article with best practices that we wish people would already know, right? You're attending this conference and you prepare yourself, probably not on Wi-Fi, probably using a good headset, right? A wired one, not a Bluetooth one. So there are certain things when you are a call center professional, if you visit call centers, you still see people connected by wire, either by headsets or by computers. I mean, it's not, Wi-Fi 6 is there, but we still don't have full duplex. So it's not going to be as stable as Ethernet, right? At least for the forthcoming years, right?
Yeah, Ollie, maybe, I don't know if you have any comments on that too, and I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about your infrastructure and the mix between you mentioned Dropbox and other partners, but maybe to start just to wrap up the end user quality type issues. Do you have complaints from the end users on quality, and I guess is there a need to kind of pin the blame or identify the root cause of that?
Well, it's because for our customers to treat people and want to get into the technology, there's a patient in your home, it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. It's very binary of going through information. I mentioned that we had a SIP network. There's a ton of telemetry to that network so that we could really monitor sessions close. Technical support team could get involved individually and figure out. We've had to develop those tools for WebRTC. It's been a challenge because the the technology is different, and so some of the tools transferred over, some build some of our own tools, or work with vendors in order to tools that we analyze quality and really. And one we had by having volume increase was the importance of these tools. People do it before they see a doctor. Most mobile devices, you're at camera, the camera won't work, and then when you try to have a session with a physician, it won't. And very, very simple things like this, in order to be experienced, because great things about WebRTC is how easy it is for people. They don't have to know. They boom, use it just like we're using in order to be able to see and interact with each other. So that's. But as developers, we have to make sure that all the parts of the internet with that, and that we take care of small of the corners. And there's something like having an application in order to be able to corner cases, different kinds of versions, different vendors. You have Apple releasing iOS on a completely to your own. You have no Chrome is going to drop a new version, or is running to all of these things. Kind of as they happen.
Yeah. Well, and maybe we'll jump ahead a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about how do you test for those different environments there too. And maybe before we get into that, do you do mobile also? Maybe we should.
Yeah, we absolutely.
I didn't see that in your.
Do mobile.
So you have native mobile apps for iOS and Android.
We have native apps, but
so
we also,
how do you go about testing? Yeah, I mean, how do you make sure when a new version of Chrome comes out, or Firefox, or iOS, that your app doesn't break?
I didn't mean to talk over you. We do have mobile patients. 72% of patients use mobile accessing doctor, and that's a mix. And we also work with some of our health systems, branded for them, so there's kind of a diversity that use covered, but inside. And then we also support the native brand, different environment. First things is if someone's having a problem, just to be under that. It's a little to the point Fernando made. About the environment executing in, the better we can support them. A lot about if this doesn't, because some combinations just are not as successful.
I assume you do some testing, I guess either with your development team or maybe with test RTC of some of the developer beta versions, and kind of try to test the new versions of browsers and software before your customers get it.
Yeah. So it's our ongoing effort, because we're very aware that we're providing sort of an extra level of testing that we do. We are avid PC, but we also with some third parties that have hundreds of different devices. The Android universe is very diverse, and it's difficult to have enough devices in your test all the combinations. But we've tested as we can. We try to stay on the leading browsers, and if there is something that we need to be aware, we try to find out as soon as we can. Really the biggest obstacle has been that we don't have that kind of advanced preview of OS changes. Apple and Google don't do that for people. Fantastic if they did.
Yeah. You mean OS or browser?
No, OS core. Yeah. So we don't have the opportunity to test on a new version of iOS data, but then use it, and then they aggressively push updates. You know, X.Y of iOS comes out, everybody's on it, and then everything works on that version.
All right. Maybe before we go back to Tsahi on some of this stuff, maybe Fernando, you could talk a little bit about how, I guess both, how do you help your agents and end users out there make sure that WebRTC is going to work and their call is going to work before they get into a call? And how do you behind the scenes help make sure that's going to they're going to have a successful call their first try?
Okay. So first, the support portal that we have, the network test that we have, which was built by Tsahi, works beautifully, right? Because it does a trial run if a WebRTC session is even possible, and it gives us so many metrics. I mean, latency, jitter, also the packet loss, etc., and the bandwidth that we can expect on that location on that time. So with that test passed, and I can see that test on my backend tool, back office tool. With that test pass, I can see if the customer is network and computer is willing to use WebRTC. After that, if they do calls, I mean, I have the analytics and the insights to see all of that information. So I can pinpoint if they were using Wi-Fi or Ethernet, which is also great. So I can compile all that information and reply to them, helping them improve in what we see that it can be improved.
And Tsahi, do you see any trends across this pre-call test data?
So there are two things. I don't like the pre-call test as a solution. Okay, I think that the pre-call tests are kind of a sham to some degree. You do a pre-call test, you connect to something that is not going to be the actual session that you're going to make. It works sometimes or all the time, and then 2 seconds later it doesn't. Now, why didn't it work the next time, which is the actual call? Because someone then joined the network and started a Zoom call in parallel, or used YouTube, or a daughter is on TikTok. You never know. Okay, so there are things about the network that change over time dynamically, and you have no control over that. What we did, at least in quality RTC, was going to a different type of a solution. Yes, we do a kind of a pre-call test, but we do about 6 or 7 other tests in parallel, and we check a lot of other things about your network. So not only that you can connect to me and do a call now, but also what's your network like? What's the uplink? What's the downlink? Do we see jitter on the network in general? Can we try and push more data than we should and see what happens? We've introduced recently a peer-to-peer call. We can do an actual peer-to-peer call between your machine and one of our machines in the cloud that is usually used for testing. And I can do such a video call and check your uplink and downlink for UDP traffic. That is actual video call. And then we collect all that data and give it in a way that is usable and actionable. Now, the problem is that you can't really do it all the time before each and every call because it takes longer. So what you do is run it either when there's a very important call and someone can prepare. So that's one, and then it's a kind of a pre-call test, or when you need to troubleshoot something or you onboard someone. Okay, so it's kind of a different type of a solution a bit from the pre-call test.
Okay. I'd like to, I guess, transition a little bit. Can we talk a little bit about your, I guess, media architecture, right? So, Tsahi, you just mentioned, doing peer-to-peer tests, that sort of thing. Maybe we'll start with Fernando. Do you route? I mean, I guess, do all your calls end up getting, anchored to a server somewhere? Or you, in terms of the media, do you do peer-to-peer? And yes. I guess also curious, can you talk a little bit of how
it is going to a server?
You do a lot of video.
We don't do any video.
Multi-party video.
We don't do any video. We don't have that as a product. We use WebRTC, just the voice portion. We use Opus, and we connect to a media server. Yes, normally there's no peer-to-peer on our testing, and I can disclose no more than this in terms of where we connect to.
Yeah. Do you, well, maybe you can give an opinion then. Do you think your life is a lot easier because you don't have to do it because you're not doing video today?
Yes, for sure. I mean, but
Yeah.
I must say that as the part of telemedicine is going all the way, right? Because of the pandemic, right? It was already big, now it's huge. There is some push for going to programmable video. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. And so Ali, I think you probably have a lot to share on this. Like, how do you make the choice between like what infrastructure and what approach you have? If you still have some SIP infrastructure, that's obviously like goes one path. You mentioned that you do also do peer-to-peer in some cases, and I'm guessing you use Talkbox and others, or maybe other services for when you want to do multi-party video. Maybe you can talk us through some of the decision making on how you pick the right architecture, right routing, both in terms of quality, price, and just development simplification, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, not a consideration. We're very focused on providing the highest quality session between a physician and a patient, and there's also a factor too. That's, as I mentioned earlier, the thing that really drove us to adopt WebRTC was the inherent zero footprint nature of the support, that it was built into all the standard browsers. So that was very compelling for us. We didn't have to ask people to download and install software in order to use the system. But our decisions are what's going to result in the highest quality. Like, for example, about 10% of our sessions are just one-on-one patient. So if those can be here, want to do that. It's the fewest hops, fewest chances for wrong. But we also do have use cases where there's family members, consultants, maybe it's a physician, one of many kind of has a similar medical issue. And so we also have to be able to support conferencing, and that's we use the media reel through talk. And we're constantly testing to will give us the highest quality. One of the reasons that we have is so that we get a diverse in terms of finding the lowest latency path through the network. It's not always obvious what data centers are going to yield that. So just do a reachability check and then we pick the lowest latency path for a given session. In some cases, that can even change in the long run. Or maybe someone's on a cell, then they get home, switches to Wi-Fi and a different, those kinds of things. So these are difficult issues. What's nice, though, is that a lot of the tools have evolved to be able to handle these. You have to do a lot of this manually. If you just sort of stay on the standard protocol, then so a lot of this gets handled. And
okay. Yeah. I was going to ask, is there a lot of work involved with going to a new data center, or is that kind of not a big deal? So therefore, you should run on a lot.
Is there a lot of work involved? Well, there's moving parts to monitor and manage. I guess pretty much they're lights off, keep running forever type of situations. You have to load and make sure that you provide for that. That was certainly a big. In the early days of the pandemic, we were able to scale rapidly with the help of our partners. Any kind of load increase like that, a sudden burst of an order of, so that we were definitely scrambling, even as we are to work from home, and instead at the same time there was loads there. But I'm really proud of our team. Actually, we came through that. I think that we helped our friends who scrambling same way a lot. I think it cemented our relationships with our customers because we were kind of going through it with our customers.
Yeah,
dealing with it.
I want to come back to that in a moment. Maybe first, Tsahi, you did mention you have expanded your data centers. I mean, do you see that as a there's I'm guessing there's some overhead involved. But help help us understand the relative overhead of a new data center, versus the value you get out of it.
So our customers are spread across the world, okay, and they want to do testing and monitoring and support across the globe. They want us to be where their customers are, period. So we needed to grow and be able to open data centers wherever they are. We switched and jumped between, in the early days, from one data center to another. Today, we have a mixture of Google Cloud and AWS data centers that we use. And we allow our customers to do these types of tests. So for example, if you want to check a video conference that originates in Europe and ends in the US, or has participants from Asia, and see what happens in such a call, these are things that are easy to do with us by simply choosing the data centers and clicking run. We've had that from the get-go in our system, and we see more and more uses for that. What we've seen recently is that the types of tests that our customers now ask for are bigger than the load that we usually had from existing customers. If I'll give an example, we've had in the last month 3 different customers come in the same week asking for running stress tests with 2,000 browsers at a time. Now, it doesn't sound much until I start explaining what does it mean to run a browser. Okay, it requires 2 cores in the cloud, so you need to go and ad hoc ask from a cloud vendor for 4,000 or more cores in the cloud on demand from now to now, because a customer clicked the run button and didn't ask us beforehand that this is what he's going to do. And we started seeing that our quotas in these cloud vendors are not high enough. So we started learning that you need quotas for IP addresses and for machines in different data centers, and you need to ask to raise them, and sometimes these cloud vendors won't raise them. So we started doing things like we've taken an external support company that works with Google directly. We started that last month, and they've been instrumental in helping us, removing these bottlenecks that we had that are administrative, or you need to understand the lore around using Google Cloud in order to be able to do that. So we're very good with writing the code, with running it, a bit less with DevOps. We're getting better with that. But now we've got the DevOps covered, the ability to know, understand Google, and the technology was already there. So it's like a rolling lesson that we're going through.
Fernando, maybe you can comment on that quickly, too. I think your slide showed you had 8 different AWS regions. I guess, why 8 versus 16? I guess there's going to be some trade-off there. How do you see that?
Right. So I cannot mention our provider, but basically we use the regions that our provider has for us. We are looking at other regions that I can tell you right now they are really on demand. I'm talking about AWS Mumbai and Cape Town. Lot of little to no implementation there, and we have a lot of BPOs that need to go live there, and a lot of business for someone who reaches there.
Yeah, I just realized BPO, like the outsourced call centers,
right?
For those in the
audience.
Yeah,
of course.
that's right.
Yeah. So, and I must say, in terms of utilization, what differences our product and many others that probably the audience is not thinking of is that WebRTC for us is just for our agents, for the persons who are using our product to take calls from the customers, right? The customer itself doesn't WebRTC. The customer does PSTN, okay? Or SIP or something else, and gets put in the conference, and then the call leg to the agent, that's WebRTC, okay? Just to put it in perspective, because people might think that we do end-to-end WebRTC or something like that. That's not what we do, okay? We use WebRTC just for the agent's call leg. But expanding what you're saying, yes. So our provider uses this GLL type global low latency system, and basically is what Tsahi already described. So if an agent in Portugal, for instance, is where I am right now, if I want to make a call, I have 2 data centers, right, to choose from, Ireland or Frankfurt. This is done automatically by their client inside of our application. And basically it's automatic. The best latency wins. Sometimes I go out from Frankfurt, sometimes from Ireland. I mean, it's whatever is best.
It's not an active decision that you need to make, I guess, in your application.
I can
It's-
make a decision sometimes. This is very important because I had customers, and you would realize, well, just seeing a little bit of geography. South Africa, I get better latencies for Ireland, for instance, okay, versus Singapore or Australia. But sometimes some calls go out through Brazil, which wouldn't make any sense, right? I had also cases in Colombia where calls were routing through Brazil instead of Virginia, which has the better latency. So sometimes the system, the automatic part of the system doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
And we had to force it, right?
Yeah.
You know that's the best path. So you go there and you disable GLL and you say, hey, everybody on this account basically goes to Virginia, and that's it. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's cost considerations too. Usually Brazil is more expensive than other regions, right?
Probably for the
all right,
provider, for us, it's the same cost.
We have a few minutes left. I did want to talk a little bit about, I guess, Ali actually had mentioned this a few minutes ago about how Teladoc staff has been able to commiserate with customers because they've been going through a lot of the same sort of transitions. Fernando, can you talk a little bit about how your team has dealt with from a staffing perspective?
I can go big time on this. So about 7 offices.
It might be we have 3 minutes left.
No,
so,
2 minutes. All of our offices closed. Okay, we all went full remote, and then that gave us a lot of freedom to hire all over the world. I mean, we're getting developers now from Armenia, for instance, to help on our workforce management part of product, which has nothing to do with voice or WebRTC, but I just thought I would mention. And it really changed. We all went mobile. We went from home, and I started supporting not only our customers but also our colleagues, right? So it's a challenge for everyone. Each time that I see someone like the voice failing during a call, I just had to ask, guy, dude, are you on Wi-Fi? Right. So it comes out naturally. So yeah, those were the changes. But it's good for us.
Anything to add there, Tsahi?
Well, for us, life was easy. We're a startup, we're small, we're global, and we have no offices. So we were working from home anyway. So it was like, okay, what has changed? Nothing. We just have more work now.
Yeah. All right. In the last couple minutes, maybe each of you can just give a brief thought on, I guess, where do you see this going, right? Some of you have touched on that already in your remarks. However, you can, you just, maybe Ali, you can talk about, I guess, what do you see next for Teladoc? You said you expect more growth, but
yeah,
what can you comment on?
Obviously the company is growing quickly. A lot of opportunity for telehealth. We're helping tens of millions of people care in the world. It's really literally the limit, and we're very bullish on the future of telehealth. Of course, pandemic, it's awful. It's going to take a long time before we're past it, but it has really highlighted the advantages of telehealth and caused an inflection in the adoption. And so that part, and hopefully we can improve healthcare and lower the cost through this technology. I think that it's foundational. It really is. We can do televideo conference web browsers in a kind of a days.
Any quick thoughts on what do you think's next?
We're continuing to grow our platform. Like I said, we now are ready for 10,000 and more per account, agents per account, and we are closing deals. I cannot say, but we are closing deals on those marks. Really, it's been a wonderful goal. Let's see how third quarter closes. Okay.
Yeah, Tsahi, you have the same sentiment?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I know you have lots of thoughts on the future of WebRTC over at Blog Geek Me, so
yes,
people can read them there. We are out of time. I'm not so sure they're going to let us keep going or not. There is one audience question. in there. Tsahi, you want to take that? And I guess I'll read it off for purposes of recording. Have you experienced issues with UDP network performance and congestion on cloud providers, and how you're able to fix it?
So from our viewpoint, we use the cloud, we run on cloud vendors, and then there's our customers and the use that I do at home and the tests that we're doing for quality. What I can say from my own experience is that the issues are not in the cloud, they are in the carriers, so closer to the edge. So these networks are strained while the cloud can handle the load. We haven't seen yet, we don't see more packet losses coming from the cloud on UDP in our tests. We usually see that once you start hitting end customers and then users and carrier networks. What you do see is that clouds are strained in terms of the CPUs that they can give you. So when we try to launch 100 cores, 200 cores, everything is fine. When you start asking for 1,000, even if you have a quota, there is more chances that you will not get these machines, and there is more chances that it will take more time. So when we started this route, and when we dynamically launch machines, it takes on average between 60 to 70 seconds to get a machine from Google Cloud. You ask, you wait a minute, you get a machine. In the last 3 months, it went up to about 2 minutes. So it takes them longer to even get us the machines that we need, and sometimes it gets 5 or 10 minutes until we can get a machine. And that's hurting us, but it's the dynamic part of what we're doing. In the network, we never had issues.
Okay.
I just want to say, Chad,
go ahead.
I apologize, but this question, you know, it's very little attention, but it's incredibly how the internet as a whole has held up under this pandemic. I mean, really, when you think about it, you know, just like order of magnitude of trying to expect that, well, you know, I don't think most service providers expected that either, but yet, you know, the general infrastructure has held up remarkably well. The world went online. It's a tribute to the inherent architectural of the internet. I think it bodes really well for the future as using it as a back.
One thing that we did see, by the way, Arthur, is in New Zealand. We had a customer coming in. He said he can't do calls. He did a stress test. He wanted to get to about 500 video calls, and things got broken after about 100. When he went and checked and tried to figure out why, it seemed that their carrier, and they were a carrier, okay, that they have throttled access, international access, specifically for UDP traffic from a certain point. And that amount of calls coming out, in our case, from Australia to New Zealand, simply got throttled. And that got them to solve and troubleshoot that issue. So sometimes this UDP traffic that gets blocked, it's not due to congestion, but actually because of throttling of that specific traffic.
All right. As a reminder, I think we're going to get booted, and there's other sessions, I think, starting. So to be fair for others, we do need to wrap it up. Thank you all, you know, so much. I mean, the panelists, has been great. I could certainly stay here for a few more hours asking you more questions, but we won't be doing that today. And for everyone else, I guess, you know, encourage you to go check out some of the other sessions. Thanks, everyone.